Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for being able to come out and join us today. So as Babwe was saying, we're running our BuildStation now. It was all open all last week and it's open for another week. It closes next Tuesday, the 9th of April. It's open 24/7, so you're always free to come here, co-work, collaborate, meet with other people. We're doing tons of workshops during the day, and then all this week we got panels running in the evening. Today you're lucky enough to have our legal panel, so we're going to learn about like a compliance, regulation, for important for you as a founder, as well as anyone wanting to break into the space, what you need to be paying attention to. Tomorrow we're going to be running a founders panel with Entrepreneur First. Day after that, a marketing panel with Zebu Live. And then finally, on the Friday, doing a community panel. And then next Monday, we'll have an investor panel. And then the final day will be our demo day, where what we're building here for is this big online competition called Colosseum. It's where you can grow and grab a t-shirt over there afterwards as well, if you sign up to the platform, where we're finding the very best talent here in the UK. And that's what we're trying to do. You can see our little photo reel here of previous things that we've been doing. We're all about finding the unicorn founders, the top developers, the very best creatives in the UK, and helping them break into this new emerging tech ecosystem with Solana. And so I'm excited now to be able to welcome up our speakers for the very first legal panel. So if all of you guys want to come on up, and then I'll introduce Jamie as the moderator. Give a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. Cool. So if I hand this to you, you'll be able to use this one and pass it along. And if you want to kick it off, introduce everyone, Jamie.
Hi, I'm James. I've been 3 years sober. No, more answer. Hi, I'm James. So I'm a lawyer at Gunnar Cook. I'm a part of the Gunnar Cook team. I specialize more on the regulatory side. Gunnar Cook is a large Web3 law firm based in the UK, acting on all sorts of projects, from the small startups, some of the biggest ones. We've been involved in writing about 2% of the world's regulation on crypto for countries like Kazakhstan, Mauritius, and a range of others. I'm particularly involved in things like setups and speed to market in the quickest, cheapest way possible without causing a heart attack on the compliance side. I've got a great set of lawyers with me today. Lawyers are not all clones, so I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves because you're going to get different answers because we actually do slightly different things. Lisa, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, should be standing. Hello. Hello. Is it working?
Yeah, so it's for recording.
Hello, I'm Nitin Datta. Thank you very much, guys, for coming here. It's a fantastic, energetic place, and I'm so lucky to be here, actually, and speaking in front of everybody. I specialize in cross-border trade, cross-border transaction, off-country transactions, taking companies to different jurisdictions, possibly protecting them everywhere, setting up stepping stones for them, setting up structures so they are on a good financial footage, which everybody is looking for, and structurally wise, ring fencing everything wherever possible. That's my primary job. I'll hand over to Tim.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tim Aaron. I'm a barrister based in London. I specialise in financial services, regulatory law, which naturally creeps into crypto, which I've been working in for a number of crypto clients for about the last 7 or 8 years. Is it working? I see. This one isn't working for the. Yeah, sorry. So I'm a barrister. I specialise in financial services law, and I'm based in London, and I primarily deal with clients in the regulated space, but naturally that means I've moved into crypto over the last 7 or 8 years.
Thanks, Tim. It's going to be weird with this mic. No, it doesn't quite work. We have to quite hold it. But I'll try and keep my voice up. My name's Steve Elam. I'm a partner at a firm called Cook, Young & Keedon, CYK. We're a boutique law firm that mainly does disputes work. So my background is a disputes lawyer, mostly in the financial services space. But I also do regulatory work and advice as well, often on the contentious regulatory side, but not exclusively, advisory work as well. Yeah, I've been working, financial services issues for 20 plus years, and specifically crypto-related stuff for probably around the last 5. both in terms of disputes and resolving those for big crypto exchanges who you'll all know, coin issuers who you'll also know, startups, individuals, the full remit. And also helping with, increasingly, with regulation and the regulatory issues that arise. So sort of really from that inception, first contact with regulators, particularly in the UK, where the FCA are gradually catching up, but they're behind. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, and everyone sort of knows it, and we're sort of grappling with that. And that's really sort of fascinating. It's probably the first 15 years of my career I spent looking at regulatory issues in traditional finance, and you're kind of looking in the rearview mirror at historic conduct, things going wrong, being judged by today's standards. This space is completely different. We're all forward-looking, trying to see how the next few years are going to look, and really trying to sort of anticipate, what the regulatory issues, outcomes, challenges are going to be, both in this jurisdiction and, frankly, in others, because it's difficult to look at it solely with a UK perspective on it. It's a pretty interesting space to be in. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Sally. I sound very lost, but I'm based in London. I'm a partner at a law firm called TLT. My role is, again, different from the other lawyers on the panel today. So I specialise in commercial law. So my background is contracts, IP, data, consumer law, kind of implementing those in a contractual way, be it terms and conditions or what have you. Assignments, licensing, working on really interesting contracts for a variety of different clients. In terms of my background, I've been working in the sort of startup specific space for a long time, since the start of my career. And I'm currently a mentor with Abbey Road. I do some of their tech startup stuff. I have also worked with large brands as they've moved towards IPO. So I'm really happy to say I've had that breadth of experience from beginning to sort of the exit stage. I find the crypto space super exciting. I've been touting Web3 as the next big thing for I can't remember how long. In the same way that I talked about AI being the next big thing about 6 or 7 years ago, and everyone was like, okay, dial it down. But you can see now with like regulation coming in this space, like the AI Act, people are really getting excited about emerging technology. And I think Web3 is the next big thing. And we're starting to see regulation coming through as it's been talked about. And I think one of the things from my perspective is how you manage that risk from a commercial perspective, and keeping in mind budget and those sorts of things. So I'm really excited to explore those issues as we have a chat with our moderator.
So just so if anybody has any question at any point, do feel free to put up your hand. You've got 5 lawyers who can't escape and can't walk out at the moment, so it's a good time to strike. Otherwise, I'm just going to make up as I go along. So, has someone got a hand up, sorry?
Already?
Go for it.
I have a question, right? So at the end there, you mentioned that emerging technologies, AI emerging, Web3 is the next big thing, and you've been you guys are lawyers in technology, right? And you also talk about budgets and having it within the right constraints. Do you guys feel like there's any room for like legal technology to bring the costs down, and how long do you think we've got until we can have some robots up there?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that initially. We as lawyers, and I'm sure everyone will agree with me, are thinking about that integration, if not proactively doing it. My law firm has its whole dedicated team called Future Law that builds AI-based solutions to bring costs down for clients and have real impact. It's a space that everybody's thinking what's going to be the next thing that AI takes over. I think you'd be hard pushed to get rid of the value add that maybe we can bring to the table. It's about us being smarter about how we use technology to help clients, I think is the way I picture it.
Just to add to that, I don't think we've been sort of quite as organised as Michelle and her firm in terms of having the sort of future law set up. But yeah, we're sort of constantly looking at this, both in terms of obviously how we can help clients, obviously just improve our own processes. As a law firm advising clients on tech and regulatory issues, if we just ignored this, it would be a really naive thing for us to do. So we're kind of grappling with that at the same time. Yeah, look, I think it will evolve. I think probably where I am and we are is that we probably haven't sort of stumbled across any magic solutions yet that really bypass or completely sort of streamline, the sort of the need for that legal input and the skills that us lawyers have and can bring to the table to help clients, which is we all took a bit of a deep breath and a sigh of relief that we're not redundant yet. But look, it's going to evolve, and there's going to be increasingly the things that we can do. And I think just the introductions touched on the sort of cost efficiencies that are really important for startups, and I think probably all in our own way from what we said. We work for larger clients, we work for startup clients, and we've all got to be pretty nimble and reactive and open-minded to sort of do that efficiently.
I think also there's an honest conversation for you guys to be had, because we'll rock up and you'll tell us you're special. We'll always tell us you're special. That is why you've got a business. That is why you're a founder. That's why you have an idea. Doesn't mean you're always special from a lawyer's perspective, though. You'll fall into boxes. But if you guys keep coming up with new ideas, we can't automate that. If you guys copy and paste, we can automate that. So one of the questions I tend to ask people is, do you want the copy and paste standard solution which other people have gone for, it's tried, it's tested, it's cheaper, or do you want to create something special, and do you want to spend the money doing that? Because you've got to work out from your own side, where do you want to spend the time, money, and effort? And I think this is a question I've got for the other panelists, as I flick the ball the other way. When you've got someone come into your life, and they are a startup, and the cash budget is limited, whereas you're a lawyer, you can talk to all sorts of things. But what are the sorts of things you tend to prioritize that initial conversation? When I rock up and I go, I want to sell Bernie coin because it's Tuesday, what do you say to me next? Yeah.
Well, lawyers are not magicians. Is it working now? We all know that. Most of my clients come back to me and we openly have an open chat, and I'm not talking about big clients. I normally like to work with startups because they've got better ideas. This is my understanding. At least they got something out of the box to tell you. And I always start my conversation with them by saying them, as Jamie said, we are just lawyers, and we are just lawyers means to say, yeah, we are not the drivers. You are the drivers, we are the navigators probably. So if we do our navigation job at the best, and you are doing your driver's job at the best, so if we can land in the middle, I think that's a better formula to start working around with. That's what I would like to just say on this.
Can I just ask Nitin and Tim, with all things building up and getting kind of crazy, what's the biggest pitfalls for cross-border transactions and staying compliant, say, for example, America, SEC, UK, FCA, what are the pitfalls? How should we protect and dealing with that?
Well, depending on what product are you going to do. If you can name the product, what space are you into?
Well, I'm looking into sort of creating a hedge fund for the crypto space. Very early beginner, and I'm looking to AI as well for some special effects things in the film world. But so I will mainly be dealing with America, SEC, and the cross-border from there to the UK. And if you're raising money or you're dealing with transactions, I want to know what generally would be from the basic level of transactions before crypto and the new technology. What are the mistakes, and how would that translate to the new environment, and what should we be aware of before it gets all crazy?
I think that's quite a specific question around the hedge fund. Very much, maybe I'll tie it within with the previous question as well. Very much when clients approach and ask questions with a plan about what they're planning to do, often there's a world of risk out there, and it's a case of trying to identify which is the risk that actually poses the most immediate risk to the client and dealing with that risk. So in your particular case, if you're looking to set up a hedge fund, you've got two immediate and fairly visible risks at any point. You've got a licensing risk and you've got a distribution risk. your licensing risk will largely turn on where you're based and where you seek to get your license, and that, that could be a conversation in and of itself. Your distribution risk is one that I think at very early stage, anyone setting up a hedge fund needs to think very carefully about where they're going to raise their funds, where they're going to market the funds, and where they sort of see their clients. Because the moment you don't focus in on that sort of a question with a hedge fund, you run the risk of tripping up on all kinds of European or UK or even worse, in many cases, US regulations. So it's often the case of sort of stepping, and this is for the wider question as well, I think it's very often the case for stepping back in terms of what you're planning to do and trying to identify where those immediate risks are and making sure you're not like a tanker that sort of sets off at the wrong degree and ends up in South America when you're aiming for New York. You've got to get these things right from the beginning. And going to the other question around costs and how to cut costs, I actually don't think it's possible to really cut costs in some areas. I think if you're in a hedge fund space, given the high degree of risks and the high degree of and the high willingness of regulators to act on a cross-border basis, it's often the case that you just have to bite the bullet on these things and think we've got to get a license somewhere, and if we're going to distribute, we've got to do that totally legally because it's such a risky area. Other areas, I think you can cut your cloth and decide, but it really does come down to the activities you're doing as well.
I'd like to add something to it. Whatever jurisdiction you choose to launch on, first of all, have an organizational structure there. That organizational structure which you set up in your basic jurisdiction, let's say in your case, if you're choosing US with SEC, then when you try to come to the UK, if you are involved in the US and you're trying to turn the ball there, keep the US team there for that moment. Try to develop a UK team. You being a founder, you of course have to be here and in both places. Basically, mistakes and pitfalls which I see normally and which I've read and studied is people try to move their teams from Australia to move to here, from US to move to UK. They might have worked better in their own geographical area, but they might not perform. Issues can be anything. I mean, forget about the regulatory issues. Those you can leave it to experts. You can be dealing with your own team's personal issues, which basically makes you even weak in your course jurisdiction. So organizational structure, that's what I always say, and ring fencing it. So ring fencing and organizational structure is very important.
Just on the, bear in mind that for a hedge fund, there are standardized structures. So it's usually BVI fund or Cayman, UK investment manager, the UK license. Only Helford are giving out this licenses currently in the UK. And so the first thing you do before you get too involved in the legal side of it, get the services provider set up for the hedge fund, because if you can't get the service providers, it's a dead man walking and there's no point moving forwards. The other thing aware for a hedge fund is minimum viable amount. If you want to get a fully FCA regulated one, is about 10 million in management. There are cheaper solutions. Bahamas has got one which scares living daylights out of me. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but it's quicker, if you see what I mean. But just bear in mind, you get the service providers correct. Bobby, shoot.
The question I want to ask is, when you're a founder and you're going up to a law firm and you say, all I've got is this idea and I've got this little bit of backing, how expensive is it to do like a basic service? Will you accept tokens now?
We will accept crypto. Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC we accept. And we have a fixed package to get a token launched via Germany, all in about 20-30K for full launch. So that's why we're doing it. I don't know if other people got other options in the room.
Yeah, we do it differently. In that I offer a different service to what you guys do. The way I operate is I do initial free calls, free conversations. So I really am happy to chat for as long as you'll let me talk to you until it gets to a point where I'm like, this is the sort of output that you need, if it's a contract, if it's a IP assessment, whatever it is that we're working out. That's the point I'll say, well, look, we've triggered some costs. These are what the costs are. You keep talking to me, but decide if you want to go ahead or not. It's up to you. We keep it quite relaxed.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, to go back to the wider question, I kind of agree with a lot of the things that others have said. But sort of quite often, I'll sort of start by going to the end and working out, well, what's the objective? Where are you looking to get to? Sort of putting that line in the sand and then working backwards. can be a pretty useful exercise to see, well, what the various risks are, how they shape up. And obviously, as Tim said, you don't want to sort of head off as a tanker in the wrong direction, but that can be quite useful to sort of work out what the sort of priorities are and the key risks, and then you can kind of work out a plan accordingly. I think probably in terms of how we approach things, we're probably closer to Michelle's idea. Happy to have initial calls, share ideas, pretty flexible about the time we spend on that. We do advisory stuff on a fixed fee basis. We do work on an hourly basis. We just try to be flexible given the needs and what the objectives are, and and having regard to a client's wider situation.
You make a really good point around risk. So you're all on very different journeys, and so somebody might be pitching to investors, whereas someone actually might want to go out to market with a product. And so the audience, in terms of what you're doing, is very different. So the risk assessment that we might have might be different for what you guys actually want to achieve, and that's why it's really important to have an objective. If a startup came to me at this stage, I'd probably do like a full audit. These are the sorts of things you should be thinking about, but prioritize it and put your budget together based on your audience. If it's your investors, or is it your product going to market? Are you trying to reach end consumers? Is that your audience? Those are the sorts of things that you factor in along the journey.
As a founder, do any of you guys actually help us raise money? Like directly, do you have LPs that basically feed into you, like, what's the latest, hottest tip to go in? I mean, do you have different organisations that feed into yourselves? Because as your leaders in the legal space, do people basically come up to you guys, particularly the LPs and other general practices, the family offices?
I mostly travel my job is basically traveling, so I meet a lot of people. So when you go from one jurisdiction to another, everybody's a bit more hyped up in Tuesday, what's happening in the other part. They are obvious family offices, which always ask you this question, but how do you judge that this person is good for them? So actually what you can do is you can put a person one-on-one. But basically what I have realized, if you put a person one-on-one with the family office, because the family office doesn't understand anything and entrepreneurs are more into their hardcore stuff, they fail to explain the basic thing, where is the money? Because I was taught by the best when I was trying to deal with things when I started my career. I used to go with any project report in like old days, like I'm talking like ancient 2002, where I started my career. I would go to any project report and my trainer would ask me, where's the money? Because I understand everything's going great, but where's money? So basically, once you have a business plan and once you need to explain to somebody, then family offices, yes, they are quite interested and quite open actually while we these days. They're quite open to the fact that they are investing in crypto. Actually, they want to move that way. You'll find that side conversations going on every family office. And some of them have as well. They have allocations like targets of now 5%. This year, last year's target was 5%. This year, I don't know. Yet to have a conversation.
So one thing to bear in mind is arranging deals and investments, if it's equity, is a regulated activity which lawyers do not have the license to do. There's the odd thing lawyers can do, which is a bit more dark side, if you see what I mean. So I've got a podcast, fund managers listen to my podcast, companies listen to my podcast, meh. There are incubators out there which are licensed to do this. I would suggest rather than look to your lawyer to do this, your lawyer loves the guy who got the law right and pays his legal bill on time. That's not necessarily the sort of person you want to speak to when it comes to fundraising. It's a different skill set, it's a different person, it's a different mentality. But have a look at the incubators out there because there's a wide range and they sell very different things. And it's not just about the money, it's about the connections, it's about the doors they can open, it's about who they know. Money is part of the journey, completely correct, but it's not the only thing you'll want. And bluntly, depending on how many businesses you've done, your background experiences, what you've got already, you may want a very different thing from the people you're talking to. So it's a two-way relationship. Once they're in, they're in. And if you hate them, that's a problem, if you see what I mean. So see who they are, get to know them, because this you want to have a long-term relationship. And if you've got a solid backer, they can protect your business moving forwards far better than anybody else and open a range of doors for you, but you have to get the right backers involved, so you don't want to rush that question.
In terms of value add though, like I've always been happy to look at a slide deck because there's been some clangers in some of the things I've seen about disclosing your confidential information in your IP. Those are the things that make you special, and you don't want your slide deck to overindulge, certainly to different people. So I would say that we might get involved in some of the process, but we wouldn't invest.
Go for it.
Again, moving away from fundraising, I was wondering, crypto's here to break down barriers and increase democratization, and the regulator is very happy about the barriers they have put in place. For example, like the hedge fund, private equity, VC, all those things. How do you balance that from a regulatory perspective when a project comes to you and it's like, we want to tokenize private equity, or we want to tokenize a hedge fund, or we want to tokenize, and basically create security, but obviously wrapped this very differently. Where do you strike the balance between what crypto wants to do and what the regulator would like to definitely not happen?
I think what comes across in a lot of conversations I have with crypto projects is that there's an idea often when a crypto project approaches a lawyer, they think potentially because there's a decentralized element or there's a crypto element, it means that it's not necessarily going to be regulated in the same way. At least in the UK, to the extent an activity, even if it's blockchain based, if it falls within the existing regulated activities, it's going to be within the remit of the UK regulator, the FCA. So having a crypto element won't really change anything. So even a crypto hedge fund, for example, would still need to be treated in the same way with a regulated manager in London, in the UK, etc. So it doesn't change things. I think that's a fundamental sort of starting point. The other point I'd make, which probably I shouldn't make being an English lawyer on a panel, is that I don't see the UK regulator in any way as particularly crypto friendly. Slight understatement, but I don't find it particularly crypto friendly unless you're very much based in the UK, or alternatively you are from a sort of a regulated background. I think what's happening in the UK is the regulator is gradually trying to build up a wall to sort of around the UK as a state, and it's reading legislation, etc., in a way that allows it to do that. And I think one thing I would say to anyone who's a founder or sort of looking in the space here, crypto does have those advantages that you pick up on. There's a whole aspect around democratization. There's a whole cross-border element. I wouldn't necessarily feel constrained in any way to feel you need to be looking, even if you're in the UK, you necessarily need to stay in the UK. And there may well be that a lot of fundraising opportunities aren't necessarily in the UK either. And you may well find that there's a much more receptive and supportive regulatory regime outside of the UK. And that might be because the UK hasn't necessarily gotten to the position of putting in place something where you might find in other jurisdictions like Kazakhstan, UAE, where they've actually taken steps to try to develop a crypto regime. And I think if you've got some flexibility on that, once you've got your license, much of what flows from that comes down to whether you can actually market your products into various jurisdictions. And that applies just as much as having a license in the UK. It doesn't necessarily mean you can then market into any other jurisdiction unless you're compliant with those local laws. So if you're able to, in your early stage enough, to take a view and look across various jurisdictions, it's worth doing it.
I think just one thing to add to that, and I agree with a lot of what Tim has said about the FCA. And there's a real discord at the moment because you listen to politicians, they talk about the UK being a crypto hub. What we're seeing day to day from the FCA is really at stark odds with that at the moment. Hopefully that will evolve over time and start to sort of take another path. But obviously the way you phrased your question about what crypto is looking to do, and actually one of the conversations I often find myself having increasingly is the benefit of a project at a pretty early stage, whether it be a lawyer, whether it be a compliance person or someone, actually getting someone, frankly, someone with some grey hair, with a traditional finance background, just to give you that perspective on things. And I know I completely get that for probably loads of people in the room, it sort of feels like a strange thing to do, and it's completely at odds with the ethos of what many people want to do. But I think it can be a really quite a valuable thing to do early when you're sort of heading down that path, because it can lead to some of the thought processes that Tim talked through in terms of different jurisdictions, and it's a reflection of the fact that whether the FCA become more crypto friendly than they are at the moment, the regulation that we're going to have here in the next 2-3 years structurally is going to be based around the existing regulation that we have for existing regulated products that we've all grown up with. And I don't think there's any getting away from that, unfortunately, because it's just the easy way for regulators and legislators to do it. So, little add.
I might add as well on this one. From a broader regulator perspective, I think a risk management profile is really important, because if you're a startup with a certain amount of budget, like, you can't be 100% compliant. So you need to prioritize based on what the full risk profile looks like, and who you're trying to target along that journey. It's very easy to go, I'm just going to comply with everything, and then you've no money left, and then you've no business. So it's trying to manage that risk as you move through it.
I was wondering how you advise your clients, considering the fact that there is not a lot of solid legislation in place yet in the crypto space, and what are you normal references or advice you would give?
So I'd say there is a lot of solid regulation in the place. There are a lot of solid rules in the place. People just don't like what they have to say. So the question then becomes, is how do you want to deal with that, if you see what I mean? Things aren't necessarily as grey as we would like them to be, because if we don't like what we read, we make it a lot greyer, if you see where I'm coming from. And that's kind of the approach you get into. But don't, there are solid things you shouldn't be doing, if you don't mind me putting it that way. But it is worth just bearing in mind that, and again, it's about picking up the higher risk areas and just taking a risk-based approach. It's a very Ponzi way of lawyers saying, how much of an arse kick are you going to get if you fuck this one up, if you see what I mean. So that's the key position you're going at. And the other thing which you see a lot is we get guys in and they'll have 10 ideas. No human being can do 10 ideas at once. Pick a single idea, execute the single idea, make money from that idea, and use that pay for the next idea. World domination doesn't happen within 2 weeks, despite the number of people who seem to think this is the way forward. So it's do that, and just focus on something that makes money at first, if you see what I mean, and then get grander and grander as you go along, because then you can buy in the teams, you can build up, the Coinbases, the Krakens, the Binances, all started as tiny little people with tiny little teams with tiny little budgets and became huge. But they weren't created within 2 weeks. They took forever to do it. So just, you don't have to achieve it all first. I don't know if anyone else has anything they would like to add to that.
Yeah, well, I think I've got a perspective of this as sort of the disputes lawyer on the panel, because quite a lot of the regulatory advice we give, and we're dealing with the FCA on a day-to-day basis, it's kind of sort of having that knowledge and understanding of where it might get to 6 months, 12 months down the line, if the FCA run out of patience and take something down an enforcement route, and what are the chances of that? And actually, the practical reality is there are plenty of crypto businesses doing all sorts in the UK at the moment, right now, who are in breach of legislation, and the FCA is not really doing anything about it because it hasn't quite worked out what its enforcement strategy might be. Certainly with overseas firms, there are limits in terms of the information that they require those firms to provide, which is different if you're an existing regulated firm and you've got much deeper, more stringent obligations. You can sort of find ways to work that to your advantage and sort of play a long game that allows you the time to sort of grow the business and do all of that while carefully managing the regulatory side of things in parallel. So I think we see that's the sort of the real life day-to-day dealing with the FCA. And I just go back to your question about how do you advise firms on some of these risks. I sort of alluded to this a little bit when I was kind of rambling in the intro, but one of the really interesting things is that sort of forward-looking risk assessment. And it's difficult. There's a bit of crystal ball gazing, and you're trying to sort of assess what might happen. But when there is that uncertainty, that probably does give you a little bit more license, frankly, for projects to start up, try and build things Not quite safe in the knowledge that the FCA aren't going to give you a hard time. They may well do, and it's an unpredictable regulator at times. But if the worst happens, you generally get a decent shot to try and manage that and show that you're engaging in the right way. And it comes back to what I was just saying about the grey hair, someone out of TradFi who knows a bit about regulation and compliance, and saying the right things and showing them that you understand what regulated firms are supposed to do in terms of engaging with regulators. It can really go a long way and buy a lot of time.
We have actually seen the FCA get round the table on a piece of legislation and do our hands up on what they think it means. So the FCA is not entirely confident in all different parts, if you see what I mean. But again, it has to make logical sense. If it makes no logical sense, it doesn't work. And I was reminded of one guy I had who wanted to sell derivatives in Pepe token to 8-year-old boys over video games. But don't worry, it's totally legit because it's DeFi and therefore I'm above the law. Not a great start for 10, if you see what I mean. So take a step back, look at it, and just go as a human adult, when you look at it, what are you thinking? And that will, at least then, if it looks sensible, that's at least a starting point psychologically, because they are, at the end of the day, human. They're not actually robots. So if it looks sensible, it does help. Not perfect. I'm not saying it's particularly easy people to deal with all the time, but it does help. Any other question? I think I saw one at the back.
I've just got one comment on it. I think knowledge is power. So to the extent you're able to sign up to newsletters and start to really learn about the law that's happening and changing, you can't be in front of it. I was reading that the Law Commission is thinking about making crypto another type of property. So instead of intangible, it might actually become stuff that they can claim back in a fraud context. That's huge. Like, that's going to change years of property law that we would have studied at university. If that happens, that's just something that you could be in front of with a couple of newsletters. So I think to the extent that you want to be in front of changes in the law, that's a really good way to keep in front of it.
What was your name again, sorry?
James.
James, that's me. In terms of what you were saying earlier about finding the right factors, what factors would you look for?
Okay, so you've got an idea, you've got a team. All teams, like top trump cards, there'll be things they're good at and things they're not good at. So you get people who know people, you get people who've got money, you'll get people who know how the rules work, you'll get people who know how the competitors work. All those different bits you slot into. So what we've done is we've actually hired a guy who isn't a lawyer at all, but he looks at businesses and he takes them apart and he goes, strategically, that's where you should go. That should be your target market. That's who you should sell to. That's how you make it work. And we brought him in because we got fed up with clients with fantastic ideas, great legals, went nowhere, no strategy, if you see what I mean. Now, we're bringing in a guy who does that and then disappears, if you see what I mean, because that's his job. If you've got that guy in your team, that's better, if you see what I mean, because we're just a service industry. So that's what I'm trying to get. Now, the incubators, there are loads of incubators in the world out there at the moment. Each one of them is going to sell to you their package. And what I was saying is look at what they're saying as different packages, if you see what I mean. So most of them have some form of mentorship program. Most of them will have some form of connections. Is your fund manager connected to 20 other fund managers? Which area is your fund manager interested in? So stablecoins are taking off. So we're getting a bunch of fund managers obsessed with stablecoins. Before that was NFTs. That was a different group of fund managers, different psychology. An NFT lover is going to hate a stablecoin. They like NFTs because they ping up and down in value. Do you know what I mean? I'm just throwing things out, but you see what I'm trying to get? That's the sort of thought process to go into. And when you go in, you're nervous because you want their dosh, and I get that. But equally, they want you because they need to get so many people in the portfolio to make it work. So it's a two-way conversation. And if you treat it like that, actually you'll be more confident and you'll be more up for it and all the rest of it. Then the other thing is look at the other portfolio companies. If another portfolio company is doing what you do, what's to stop the fund manager quizzing you, getting your best ideas and telling his other portfolio company? They're not necessarily going to be saints here, if you see what I mean. So you have to have that kind of mindset.
And this goes back to protecting your brand at the outset. So like no one within your slide deck doesn't give away too many secrets. Making sure that you're just saying what you need to get in the room to sell it to them without actually giving away what's your USP and then actually being able to replicate it somewhere else.
How do you prevent that without revealing too much?
You can get whoever's in the room to sign an NDA. I mean, it's not ideal because if you did get sued under it, or if you sue under it, are you going to be able to follow through? Probably wouldn't want to waste all your money to do that, but it's trying to balance how much you disclose to the people that you're meeting. Do you know them well? Have they got a reputation for doing that kind of thing versus are they really good good reputation. It's knowing who you're talking to, having an NDA, and then making sure your slide deck is tight around the IP.
Well, I'd like to add something to it. An NDA won't stop anything, but it will definitely protect. So it's more like it's more like sleep, which people think they should not cross. But it's always best to have an NDA than not have it.
Maybe you look more important. You want to go? No? Yeah?
Me?
If you want to.
Sorry, I wasn't sure who you
Yeah.
I was wondering, you can say no, could we get like a demo of you guys thinking through a case? I think somebody touched upon maybe like tokenized hedge fund or so. Like there's a lot of RWA happening right now. And they're normally by default security, right? Real world assets. Could you real world assets. So like you tokenize a thing if that's rental property or businesses or gold or whatnot, and you want your token holders to get a profit from that, a tangible one, right? Like that normally puts us in like a security category at best and very much regulated at worst. I don't know, would you walk us through how you think about that and like making that happen for company? If it's billable hours, tell us as well. I just feel like something tangible to see how you
Hang on,
think
billable
about
hours
that.
for all of you, just so I just ask you the question.
Okay, you're sending us the bill afterwards on the wallet, okay, I see. Perfect, like how would you, because like we as the startup would want this to be legal.
Yeah. So I think
as the baseline and not a security ideally.
Yeah.
Make up a startup and then they all use it.
So I think if you've got, if a project approaches us as lawyers, as I said at the beginning, you and especially if there's a budgeting issue, you try to identify where the risks are. If it's a RWA tokenization project, what are they tokenizing? In some cases, you can probably say if it's a simple tokenization of a currency or potentially even gold, then you may be in a very different category to say if you're tokenizing real estate. I think was another example you gave. If you're tokenizing gold, then potentially that could be a security, and there's various ways around that, and it may well be that the gold. Yeah, well, it's the gold that's in the safe actually has a name put on it, and that's potentially one way around that. So you can find ways which may well deal with some of the security risks. If you're dealing with something, if a client came to me and said, I want to tokenize real estate, I would immediately flag that as a very immediate risk, because then you're very likely stepping into the collective investment scheme space. And that, to me, creates a whole, of course, that's a security as well in its own way under EU law. And at that point, I think the point is to work through the client, and in all of these cases, to work through the client with the client very carefully about exactly what they're planning to do in terms of the activity and what part of the chain they're doing as part of that activity, and really break it down, and then to say to the client, if you're planning to do this particular type of business, you are moving into the space of, in this particular case, say, developing a collective investment scheme, and therefore you would need to have these licenses. But it always comes back to that. I think when you go into those meetings, to have a very, as someone on the panel said, have a very clear idea about what it is you want to do, because the only way I think the lawyer will be able to advise is to really break down the business and say, actually, you're not doing it quite in the way I thought you were doing it, therefore you're probably not a security, but if you do it in that way, you would be, so you might want to. So it comes down to really breaking down the analysis, even before you sit down with a lawyer. And that comes down to not just the analysis around the activity you're doing, but as I said at the beginning as well, around how you want to market it, because those are the two pegs that the regulators will act on. And the moment you don't have a plan for either, or you can't sit through, sort of talk your lawyer through what those plans are, I think it's a wasted con with the client.
So we've got 3 last questions, because I've just got there's a barrier and I couldn't see 3 people at the back. So do you want to go first? Sorry.
So when Rishi was Chancellor, Rishi doing that, he was talking about digital pound, Prime Minister now. So is that something you guys can give us an update on?
It's chugging along very slowly. No one gives us a reason why they want it. Most of the crypto community hate it. There's a fight out between those stable coins and the guys with the digital pound. It's probably going to go nowhere, but it's gently chugging forward, so it's sort of going like a slow tanker through the ocean. Next question.
Hi, I'm currently working as a legal and compliance manager for a crypto startup. I was just wondering, because I heard you say that maybe they should get in contact with a grey-haired probably male person who has worked in financial services for quite a while now. I was wondering, you as lawyers, how challenging do you find communicating with people from the crypto world and from the startup world, and having to convince them that actually you do need to follow these regulations, you do need to become compliant in certain aspects, and whether or not you sort of like speak in the same language essentially, because I don't know, it's something that I did find a little bit of an issue coming from a legal background and going into a startup.
Well, I'm blonde, so I'm exempt. Do you want to go for it?
Should I take that? Because it sort of came from my comment, and I hope I didn't suggest probably male, because that certainly wasn't what I was suggesting. Well, I take your point. But in answer to your question, actually, probably two things I'd note. One, most of the time, dealing with people in crypto startups is actually hugely refreshing because they're smart people with good ideas. They're not sort of burdened by, I don't know, burdened by 20 years of working in traditional finance. You know, that kind of affect someone like me. Frankly, I've seen plenty of that. So that's really refreshing. In terms of the second bit of your question, which was the sort of how receptive people are to understanding regulation, the need to grapple with that. I think one thing I have seen quite often, and this is in startups, there's also in really quite well established crypto businesses. They tend to be offshore businesses who don't really have a presence here. Very, very smart people, but some of them are incredibly naive still when it comes to regulation and compliance and risk management issues. Well, I mean, Binance. I mean, they made some bad mistakes in how they've handled things in the UK, and elsewhere, obviously as well. But just sort of focusing on the UK, and there's been times where historically I've advised businesses who are not as big as Binance, but do pretty much the same thing. And we've actually steered them clear from UK regulation for a bit because it's just not the right time. It wasn't the best time to get involved with that because it was probably going to end in tears. That's probably an example of someone who was thinking about regulation. But I'm dealing with firms now who are generally based in all the sort of funky offshore jurisdictions you might know. And it's a real struggle. There's a bit of head in the sand on regulation, and you're trying to do the right thing with the clients and sort of pull the head out of there to try to engage with it, but it's a battle.
I can see more. I'm afraid we're out of time, I'm afraid. But one more.
Yeah, just squeeze one.
Yeah.
This guy's had a hand.
Yes. So I didn't catch you right. I was like trying to sort of.
No, I'm just blind, so sorry.
When we talk about FCA regulations, are they worried about crypto or more than the technology behind that as a blockchain?
They like blockchain.
Sorry,
They like blockchain. They like tokenized stuff. They like tokenized equity we did with them. They like all that. It's not that we dislike crypto. It's that crypto is complicated. And we spoke to one of the guys at the FCA, said every time Bitcoin loses money, every little old lady across the entire United Kingdom gets on the phone and personally shouts at him because she's been scammed. And that's the mindset walking in. And we've sat through more scams being shoved in front of the FCA. We actually end up having a meeting once a month with the FCA, which is more like a sort of have a cry in the corner moment because the number of scams we saw come in on the first wave. So you've got that initial flush at the regulator, and it scarred them a bit, to be completely blunt. But the regulator sees crypto as risky, the same way it sees derivatives as risky. And you get risk plus risk equals, well, even more risk. But I'm going to ask one question to the audience, because you lot have been getting away far too much. Put your hand up if you know what a share in a company is. Share in a company. Because it's not an ownership right. It's not a right to a dividend. Hands are still up. Anyone feeling like it? Anyone want to put it on? What do you think? Go, you go for it. What's share in a company?
Something I can issue every time I create one.
Nope. What's share in a company? Specific legal definition. What's share in a company? What's the actual definition they've all signed up to? Share in a company is a right to the proceeds of the company when it is liquidated. So when the company is liquidated, you get a share of what's left. About about 5% what's left in an empty can, effectively. So when your fund manager comes in and goes, buy all these fantastic shares, they've just sold you the proceeds of something which will only ever have any effect if the company is regulated. No rights to dividends, no ownership rights, no rights to influence anything, none of that. This is why crypto is doing what the South Sea Bowl did about 200 years ago. They made all shares illegal in the UK because they were a scam, they were a fraud, we didn't know what they were, we couldn't get our head around them. So just because it's new, just because it's scary, just because it's different, doesn't mean it's not important, doesn't mean it's not the future, if you see what I mean. But bear in mind, that's the mindset you've got, because most of the NFTs, the last thing, lost 99% in value. You go to a regulator, you go, we should be selling this stuff to the British public, we should be selling stuff that loses 99% of its value.
It's like a penny shares.
I think there's one. I think the way the FCA look at it is a little bit beyond that fraud risk, or I think they also are aware of what the technology might mean for the industry they regulate, because they regulate basically a web of interactions between various regulated entities. If there's an exchange, there's interdealer brokers around it, there's settlement banks, there's clearing agencies, clearing houses, etc. The moment you have a technology which can remove all of that, you suddenly remove the core of the city, and you also remove the core of what the FCA is regulating. And I think any financial services regulator is very alive to those risks. But what they want to do is make crypto look and smell like what they regulate, but just bring in the underlying technology, but keep the web of interactions they've got. And the moment you've got a crypto industry which doesn't necessarily conform with that, or potentially sits offshore and provides better services by doing that offshore, that is very threatening to a regulator. And I think that's one of the issues the FCA has.
Also regulation.
So more questions, or do I have to now stop? Oh, no, go for it. Hi.
Great. I would like to ask Michelle a question. She's sitting on so most of you are sitting on the structure and the compliance side. She's sitting on the making money side. So,
see where the queue is after.
I would like to ask you, when you're working with founders for Series between pre-seed, seed to Series A plus, or this stage, what are the three things that you wish they would get their head around faster, so they can make it and have a higher chance of succeeding?
Okay, three things.
Go for it.
Number one, your intellectual property. Your assets are so important in this industry, especially in tech. And it's good to map out what they are, but also work out how to protect them. So thinking about the next level, oh great, I've got an idea. How do I actually make sure that nobody else can steal that? Number two, your contracts. If somebody else is developing your IP, if you're signing up to relationships with third parties, if you're starting to use exchanges, get to know the terms and conditions that you're signing up to. Actually read the contracts, so that when you come to a meeting with your lawyer and they say, what have you signed up to? You don't go, I'll give it to you so you can have a look for me. Start to really get into the weeds of your contracts. And the third thing is a really interesting question. I think data is so important now as we move forward, and people sort of groan like everyone knows their data and how to protect it. The GDPR scared the life out of everyone for a long time. But data mapping is a really good thing. And it's just, again, knowledge is power. Coming to the room, knowing what data is, who you're sending it to, and what you're going to do with it is a really good starter point to then sort of have really productive conversations with your lawyer who can give you the next level of advice, instead of me saying in the room, these are the three things I want you to think about next. Really great question, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
I think we need to stop it here. Give this panel an amazing round of applause. They only knew they were coming here on Thursday night. Some didn't even know they were going to do that. So big round of applause and everything. Stephen, the floor's yours, bud.
Well, I want to, again, thank you everyone for being able to, thank you guys for being able to educate us all about the legal sort of side. Remember that this is open 24/7, so you're welcome now. We have a mixer running, so you're welcome to network, collaborate, to be able to speak one-on-one with everyone here. And then we'll be back again tomorrow. We're doing a founders panel with Entrepreneur first. After that, marketing one, then community, then investors, and it ends next Tuesday. It's open 24/7 for that entire period. If you have any questions about building on Smile or Super Team, please reach out to myself or to our team. So we have Arch and Michael here to be able to help you guys take the next things. So Arch runs the marketing and Michael runs the events. So we're here to be able to help make magic if you're going to be building in the space. And appreciate everyone for being able to join us. Okay, one last round of applause for our amazing speakers.
Likewise. Good observation too, wasn't it? Yeah.
Go, Jamie, get the